Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about episode 8 of Noblesse. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, you have Getsuto showing up at the school, and obviously he's looking down on M21, Tao, and Takio because they're humans, but they're experimentations, and we see where Regis kind of gets his perspective on things from, because all nobles kind of have that perspective while also but it's also like he's getting that from his grandfather, because his grandfather is like, I can't believe you like, have you lost your sense as a noble that you'd be around these creatures? But then the moment he sees like Frankenstein is there, and this episode also gives you obviously a lot more insight into it. Well, a tiny bit into Rai's past, but mainly into Frankenstein, like why he is Frankenstein. It's like he's not called Frankenstein for no reason. He's legitimately the scientist like Frankenstein he experiments, but he mainly experimented on himself. It also answers something interesting that, Frankenstein referenced earlier in the series, where he was like, it might even been an Awakening. I don't think he says it necessarily in this series, but in Noblesse Awakening, he was like, when he was fighting Marie, he said a line basically along the lines of, you must be based off of my work. Essentially, the Union took what he did, the foundations of what he did on experimenting, giving humans the powers of the nobles, and like they experimented and created their experiments, like M21, Takio, Tao. As well as like the rest, like Hammer, Shark, Kronz, as well as Marie and Jake, and all M24 and the others as well. So it is interesting, then, because that conversation comes up in the episode too, where it's like Takio, Tao, and M21's like, so Frankenstein's not one of you? It's like, no. Like, even, like, me and Sarah have been trying to, like, Sarah's like, yeah, me and Regis, neither one of us is actually clear on what he is. We know he's a human, but he's definitely not a noble. But it's also shocked because Regis, like, I had no idea my grandfather and him knew each other. Obviously, they go way back. But obviously, Getsuto comes here. Obviously, he kind of gives us a little lore background as well. Like, obviously, the country that they're from. I said an island, but I guess, because I think it is like an isolated island. Kind of like, I guess, like, because in my mind, I thought it was like, I knew it was kind of its own place, but I don't know if it's actually, I think it's on an island. Because I didn't remember its name. That's why I didn't call it by its name or anything. Like, it's not like, I was trying to avoid spoilers. I legitimately didn't remember. I knew it was a separate place, but I didn't realize, like, it was its own, like, I don't know if it's like its own island like Japan is. Like, that's what I mean. Like, and maybe it's something of that similar nature, but I like I say, I feel like I vaguely remember they had to take a boat to get there, so I think it is kind of its own thing, but it's a country known as Luxonia. It's where all the nobles are from. Obviously, you learn a little bit more about their system, the clan leaders like Getsuto, as well as Sarah. That's why she has a soul weapon, because those are signatures of someone being high nobility who is going to be the next clan leader in her particular clan, so... I also love the whole conversation of, like, the reason why Tao ended up figuring out that Regis and Getsuto were related was because, like, right, the black streak in their hair, he figured, like, it wasn't a fashion sense, it was probably, like, hereditary, but it turns into a whole big conversation between them where it's like, yeah, because that would be terrible fashion sense, like, long hair and a bowl cut. He's like, this is a techno cut, and Takeo is like, I prefer not bringing scissors, I like to keep my hair natural, and then Regis go, right, let's get back to the subject. But obviously they want Getsuto knows, obviously Rai's like, right, Regis and Sarah were sent here for me. Yeah, it's like, right, the moment they heard about the coffin, they were sent here. They didn't know what they were supposed to find in the coffin. That's why they immediately didn't recognize Rai when they met him, because they're fairly young. They probably weren't even alive at the time he was at Luxonia. Obviously he's been gone for 820 years, but, they're probably, they could be like, for example, like Sarah could be like 500 and Regis could be like 250 for all we know. But, Getsuto also kind of gives us a little backstory as to why the leader, the current Lord, Rostria, hates Rai so much. She blames him for her dad's death. Like, in this they tell him out, like, for their species, for their people, even the eternal sleep is synonymous with death. And it's not just the previous lord, Roskira's dad, it was also like, I said Roskira, Roskria. I was adding an extra S in there, but Roskria, like, it's not just her dad, it was other lords that followed as well. So, like, there's a vast, like, vacuum in just, like, the power vacuum of, like, because I think new clan leaders are kind of in positions, but not all of them. I guess that one dude in particular, I'm blanking on his name now, who was the one that was kind of defending Sarah and Regis. The fact is that it's like, right, they didn't immediately turn in Rai, like, the moment they found him. It's like, right, he's a traitor, you know, but he was the one that's kind of like, you know, it's okay for kids, you know, kids sometimes don't do their homework. He was kind of defending them a little bit, but it's like, as clan leaders, it's like, no, like, he needs to be captured. He's, you know, Rai's a traitor amongst us. Obviously, there's a lot more to that story, but that's like what I was kind of hinting to before of, like, I think I referenced it in a previous episode that she hates Rai, and there's a reason for that, but obviously you learn more about that as the storyline obviously continues, but, a big part of this episode, too, was just, like I said, a look into the past, but it was mainly focused on Frankenstein. But we did kind of get moments between the Lord and Rai where he was like, oh, you should live here. And he's like, I decline. I got maids. I decline. And it's like, yep. The moment he's done with, like, the conversation, he just leaves. It's like, oh, he's so antisocial. But then, like, Getchutel is kind of like, yes, but he has a special role. But before he can really say anything, the Lord cuts him off. It's like, yeah, but I'm the Lord, so that kind of gives me superiority, so he should listen to me, right? Kind of show you, like, the Lord's silly side, but also the fact is that he's interested, like, oh, there's a human that possesses our powers. How did he get there? It's like, they don't know the methods at the time, but it's like, all right, bring him to me. I actually want to talk to him, you know, because he finds it, you know, a human that's gained this type of power so fascinating. But learning more about Frankenstein, and I think it also explains, like, why he gives people like M21, Takio, and Tao, like, such leeway. Because when he looks at them, he looks at himself, but it's also they're a byproduct of someone taking his research and running wild with it. I'm going to throw this out there, and I'm not saying this because, like, oh, I remember it. I'm throwing it out because I don't know if that's true. I don't know if Frankenstein started the Union, or at least some form of it branched. Like I brought up, like, some form of it branched off from him, but I don't know if he started something that would eventually become the Union, or maybe there was someone that was under him, or just someone else found his research. They just haven't been able to properly replicate it because no one they've gone up against has come close to... I mean, yeah, people can hang with Frankenstein when he's sealed. Obviously, he's well above a human level, even in that state. But no one, like, none of the experiments so far could go toe-to-toe with him when he's kind of going all out. Takio's, like, the closest to kind of putting any dent into him, but it's, like, it's pretty one-sided once he's kind of going all out. But he's known as the Noble Hunter because he's kind of because he'd also made that clear, like, when he was talking to M21 earlier in this season about, like, right, not all the nobles view things the same way, like, that whole, like, oh, humans need to be protected type of thing. But it's also, like, the why he had the, like, reactions he did early on in the seasons because it's connected to his past. He was someone that wasn't all about... Because I think he sees a lot of himself in M21. I think that in particular about, like, M21's statement of, like, yeah, that's not for me. Like, I think he sees a lot of himself in that. I even love that line from Getchutel where he was like, because Frankenstein's like, yeah, you can stay here. I couldn't necessarily just, like, kick Regis' father out. But if it was up to me, you would leave immediately. And he's like, you never change. Even the fact is that you refuse to bare your fangs in front of him, and that kind of pissed Frankenstein off. But it's like, because it's like, right, you just want to probably, like, if you could, you'd probably attack me right now, but you won't. You'd never bare your fangs in front of Rai unless he gave you permission, you know? Because we also got to see, like, the more devilish, the devil that is inside of him, like, how, like, we've seen little creaks of it, like, peeking out when he kind of, like, when he cuts loose, you see that devil inside of him a little bit more, but obviously he has that very, like, silly demeanor, and he has a serious demeanor, but then there's, like, more, like, oh, like, I'm a, like, you know, but there's, like, that mad scientist, you know, the Frankenstein effect. You know, it's actually an interesting thing, too, like, since it is now they're kind of explaining his past, it is interesting that Frankenstein himself, in this particular case, is both Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster. But I guess you could also make the argument, technically, like, M21, Takio, and Tao are all, like, his monsters, too. Like, they're all born from his fruit. But he rather than kind of making someone else the monster, he became the monster himself, even kind of almost selling his own soul in a certain regards. So I just think that's such a fascinating iteration with kind of taking Frankenstein in this direction, is making it, it's like, no, I made myself the monster. Because, I mean, and I think that's almost probably playing a little bit with the aspect of, most times when people talk about the story of Frankenstein, I've made the mistake in the past, is referring to Frankenstein's monster as Frankenstein, but the monster he made wasn't Frankenstein, it was Frankenstein monster. Frankenstein is the scientist, Victor Frankenstein, who made the monster. So, but I think it's almost playing with that element rather than it's like, oh, in this particular case, you saying Frankenstein is a monster would be correct in this particular case, but obviously with the original novel and most iterations that they correct that. It's kind of like the pop culture thing. I think most people like correct that a lot. It's not like, oh, when you see it, it's like, oh, that's Frankenstein. It's like most people correct it. It's like, no, that's you're Frankenstein's monster, or like the Bride of Frankenstein. Well, because isn't it technically, because it's technically like the Bride of Frankenstein's monster, but I think he originally made the bride, was it for his monster or was it for himself? Because she's always, but it's like, she's always known as maybe it's just one of those things where it's like kind of like that it gets cut off, so it's like it is the Bride of Frankenstein's monster, but it's just kind of the Bride of Frankenstein is how I mostly hear it. But like I said, maybe once again, maybe that's just another incorrect. Regardless, the whole point I was making was just like the parallels you can draw that he became like no monster. But also why, like I said, he hunts nobles and stuff like that. Because for him, there are so many nobles that aren't so noble, and they hunt and use humans. It's like, right, we only, like, make blood pact with humans when it's necessary and if they wish it. It's like, but to be fair, there's also that power dynamic of, like, right, you guys are like gods to them, so they'll kind of do whatever. You know, people in the past have always, I mean, you could say past, but still, like, make sacrifices to gods. It's like you pray to gods, you sacrifice for them. Like, once again, I've made that reference recently in something like the whole, like, sacrificing virgins and stuff and everything. But, like, that's why Frankenstein. So there's, like, a little altruism to it. Like, we don't know if it's, like, because I actually don't remember if it was someone personal in his life, or it's just he witnessed it time and time again of the nobles taking advantage of humans, treating them like they're weak. And it's like, now there's a human that's risen up, that's just as strong as you, that has the power to yours. So humans aren't as weak. This is what we're capable of. His mad science tree is what led him to it. But like I said, I don't know if like he had like family in particular that was manipulated and used and discarded by a noble that pushed him to that, or was it just seeing the way they treated humans? So like I said, it's just like early points in the show, like that whole conversation, you could tell like it rubbed him the wrong way when he was talking about it with M21, like but it's because he has his own personal stakes in that whole discussion about how nobles operate. And I think that's why he doesn't have that perspective. Why he used to have that perspective as M21, but now he realizes not all nobles hold that. So he has a grudge against all nobles because he thought all nobles felt like that. But it's like, no, he met Rai, and so he knows that not everyone is like that. But even in that fight against Gachutel and the other clan leader, even it's like, right, like I'm acknowledging your skills because I'm even bringing out my soul weapon. Once again, showcasing like how powerful they are. It shows you how much of on a different level they are. Because this is before Frankenstein had his power sealed. So when he's fighting him, it's like, yo, I'm going all out. And it's like, you're dodging it, keeping up with me, defending against it. And it's like, right, he's bringing out his soul weapon to show like, no, like I respect you, Frankenstein, your ability. Just to make sure this ends quickly. Because if this goes on, this could make you living harder. So I gotta end this now. And so it's like, oh, you summon your soul weapon? I'm gonna summon mine in the dark spirit. And this is when Frankenstein really goes out. Like, what bringing out the dark spear means ain't no holding back now. He made his own soul weapon. It's like, right, granted, it's out of his control because using it even a little, he ended up, just for a while, getting consumed by it. They tried to stop him, which luckily they were able to, but Frankenstein got wounded from the fight, but got away, but the dark spear still is beyond his control, so lo and behold, finds his way into Rai's manor, which Rai's the only one living there. Because that's another thing too, like, I remember some of Rai's circumstances. Once again, like, the title of this series, what it means, and what it means in relation to Rai, I know that, and kind of remember what, because that all relates to what Getchutel was trying to like bring up earlier about Rai's significance. But once again, like, he's kind of seen as a traitor at this point in time, in particular by the Lord as well as the other clan leaders. Obviously, there's a little dissension amongst the ranks, as one of them was like, what's his name, Rael, was kind of like pissed because it's like, no, like, have just as much claim to like the clan leadership as my brother. That being the whole conversation, I thought was interesting because it was like, because the other dude that was kind of defending Regis and Sarah was kind of like, oh, at least your little brother decides he wants to live, because it's like, I think he knows like, yo, trying to go after Rai is kind of a death sentence. Probably not even because of the Frankenstein thing, but just going like, you kind of underestimate like Rai, like it's like kind of going down that route, kind of it'd be a quick way towards death. Essentially, I think he knows better than anyone what Rai's like fully capable, because I think some of the other leaders are too young to know who he really, hence why like Regis and Sarah didn't know immediately. But so obviously like there's, you know, like I said, Tell had brought it up early in the episode that like there's a vast like vacuum of power because of just how much it, like Luxonia isn't like as, the equilibrium is completely off just because like so many of the clan leaders are gone, no successors have really stood up. It's just the power vacuum is just vast all around. So, but circling back to it, I love the whole like, obviously like Frankenstein finding his way to Rai's place, and Rai's going, those clothes, those are mine. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, you know, and it's like that's, and I think it speaks volumes that Frankenstein didn't immediately attack him, didn't look down. It's like, right, he saw something in Rai's eyes, and this is the beginning of their, obviously this is going to be, this arc dives heavy into their past. Like I brought up, like everything between like Rai and Luxonia, their past, like why she hates him as much, why she blames him for her father's death, and like the truth behind it, because it isn't as you know, I mean, spoilers, but it's like there's more to the story. I mean, I'm sure anyone coming across is probably like, oh, it's probably not that, because of who Rai is, you wouldn't think he is. Frankenstein, on the other hand, you'd be like, oh, I could see Frankenstein being responsible for someone's death. I mean, he was responsible for a lot of people's death, and you know, I mean, he's always been the one that's just like, he's always had this scary side to himself. Like Rai, he's scary with his powerful, but his demeanor has never been like wild maniac like Frankenstein's has been. But still, I think we're going to get more about that past going forward, while also dealing with everything present day. Because Tell was kind of like, right, who will you come back to Luxonia? And Rai is like, I want to stay here. Can I stay here a little longer? Because I think for him, it's like, he knows, you know, it's like they knew this day was going to come eventually. But I think for him, it's like, right, he got attached to this human life here. He likes it here. And so he just wants to spend a little more time with his friends before like having to confront the past, because I think it's also because Rai knows better than anyone, especially after the last arc, what that circumstance, like, you know, coughing up blood like that, what that means for him. So he's trying to make every moment count, essentially. I think that's kind of the direction everything's kind of heading in. So I'm excited to see, like I said, this is probably my favorite arc of all of them. I really like all of them, but I think this one was my favorite just because you finally get to like shroud a little bit of that, like get rid of some of the shroud of mystery that's kind of been set up, because stuff about Rai and Frankenstein is like, you know, it's not like, oh, the anime skipping over. It's like, no, it's not until you get to this arc, even in the manhwa, that they really like go deep into like, because I think, you know, because I don't think there's like in even like Noblesse Awakening, like I said, it's very condensed, but it's a lot of the character interactions that like kind of, it's no like lore stuff that got cut out. And so, you know, even if there's some things have been changed or modified or added, it hasn't really like taken away from like, it hasn't like steered. It hasn't Full Metal Alchemist or something like that, which, you know, I mean, because some anime can Full Metal Alchemist. It's not like Full Metal Alchemist is the only one that's ever done that, going like very far away from the original source material. Whole conversation, but like I think this is being truly, really faithful to the, you know, as well. But like I said, I could be mistaken. Like I said, there might be some additions, like some modifications that I've kind of pointed out. That there are probably others that I probably haven't pointed out because I, once again, unaware because it's been so long. But like I said, either way, I'm very excited to continue into the next episode with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.